Welcome to Q&A with me. So this talk came about very surprisingly and very quickly last week when I asked Greg if there happened to be a slide. He's like, sure, yeah, you could do a graphic thing. Also, why don't you do a Q&A? I'm like, well, on what? I don't know. So he originally called it like Q&A with Chet. We could probably clarify this and actually specify topics. Maybe that would be helpful. But go ahead and please do ask questions, and I will offer something random in response. I have no idea. It depends on the question and depends on how this goes. So I wanted to maybe help a little bit by saying, well, here are some of the things that we could talk about. I think the original idea that Greg had was maybe we could focus around the book and Android history in general. So I did a talk at droidcon last year and at a couple of other conferences on Android history, focused on content of the book, and it's a nice sort of keynote-y kind of piece for these Android conferences because it's very topical, but it's also higher level. But I already did that here, so I wasn't going to do the book talk again. But it's also kind of fun to discuss it in general. I think there are a lot of questions about how it came to be. Some of the stories I couldn't get into because 412 pages was long enough. Thank you very much. So I'd be very happy to talk about any of that stuff. If you want to talk about books in general, I have opinions about writing and about why people probably shouldn't. And we could talk about certainly Android history. I think it's an interesting story. It is why I told the book. I'm making zero money on it. All the profits are being donated. But I just think it's an interesting story about the team and the people and the reasons why it succeeded. So I assume that's where the discussion is going to go. But if you want to ask questions about graphics, that's totally valid. I've been doing graphics ever since I went to grad school in the early 90s because I hated my job and I wanted to do graphics instead. It seems to have worked so far. Performance tends to be highly connected with graphics because, of course, you need to put the pixels on the screen as fast as possible. We could talk about performance. I like doing animation, also related to getting the pixels on the screen. I've certainly done my share of animation stuff on Android. I have a lot of opinions, obviously, about public speaking and ways to do that or not. We could talk about that if you'd like. We could talk about comedy. I actually think that the comedy stuff that I've done, the stand-up and the improv, has more to do with my public tech talks than it does any of the actual technology or knowledge going into them. So it turns out comedy is really good training for seriousness. We could talk about relationships if you want. I have 3 kids. I certainly have tips on parenting. But basically, ask questions. And I'm going to do a little motivational thing and say, Greg was really excited about this stuff happening this week, and he tried really hard to get some books to give away, not sell. These are like, I think, 25, what's the currency here? Pounds? And that's also the weight of the book. So these are giveaways, and then how do you give away 40 books to a crowd of 500? I could rip them into sizes of 20 pages each, or we could use the questions as a way to get a book. So if you ask a nice question, and it's not just asking that question just to get your name on that list, but if you ask a reasonable question, hey, I'll put your name down. That's a way to spawn the conversation and make it a little bit more interesting for the rest of the people in the room who are also encouraged to ask questions. I'm not just here to just stand here quietly for the next 17 minutes awkwardly, but I'm going to do that too. That's it. That's all the slides. Go. Yes. Oh, sorry. He went that way, and you asked that. I'm sorry. I'm going to pay attention to you next time, but can we send the mic over to him right there? Thank you. And I'm going to click on here. I'm going to type in names as I hear them. Is that on?
What are your opinions on public speaking? And maybe a second question, how did comedy help you be more self-confident in doing tech talks and so on?
Great questions. Only one book, though. Sorry, say your name when you ask a question, because I need to write that down. I can't read that far, I'm sorry.
Thomas Sigmund.
These work, but they're not actually binoculars.
It's Thomas Sigmund.
Thomas S. Okay, great. And I'm going to ask you, so after this thing is when we're going to do book signing. I can deface your book for you if you want. That's going to happen over there because there's a session 10 minutes after this ends, and I don't want to get in their way. So after I'm done, I'm going to move over there with this heavy box of things. So meet me over there, please. So yeah, opinions done. So my biggest opinion on public speaking is I prefer everything to be a little bit more impromptu. If I can possibly avoid it, I never write a script for what I'm going to say because I would rather make up the words, even if I'm stumbling and everything's not perfect and polished, which it never is with my talks. See if you notice that. But I prefer actually being in the room and being engaged with the audience that is there. I think that's much better than nailing exactly the points that I wanted to nail and doing it in such a monotone voice that nobody actually cared or listened. The thing that I think contributes to that for public speaking more than anything else is comfort on stage, which relates to your next question. So one of the things that I suggest people do if you want to give public talks or if you want those talks to get better is to practice. And what I mean by practice is don't practice giving talks, but practice being up on stage and speaking in front of people, because the more comfortable you can be on stage, the more you start to enjoy it, and the more the audience starts to enjoy you being on stage. If you've ever seen a stand-up comic fail, there are two ways it can go. Well, probably more, but I've seen two ways. They can, like that joke can tank, and they can get very nervous, and they can get angry and insecure, and they can have an awful time. And the audience does not want to be there, right? They do not want to experience that. It's not like, yay, we made them fail. No, they don't want to be there. That's a horrible situation, right? For everybody concerned. But I've also seen a stand-up comic bail. That joke didn't work. And then they take a step back, and they analyze it. And then they talk about it, and they have fun with it. And the audience does need to be there. It didn't matter that the joke didn't work. It mattered that they were there in the room with them, reacting to the audience. And that was their comfort on stage, not caring whether a joke worked, but just having the energy and the confidence to actually be there with the audience. So to me, that is the main thing. Can you be comfortable on stage? Can you enjoy this? Because if you are enjoying it, the audience will as well. I hope the audience will as well. And then comedy, as I said, like I do comedy because I enjoy comedy. I've done a little bit of stand-up. I would need to work a lot harder to get good at stand-up. I've done a bunch of improv stuff, and I've done like the parody comedy talk stuff. I love all that stuff. That's why I do it, because I really enjoy getting a laugh on stage. Excuse me. On stage. Not a laugh like that. That was just awkward. But I do think that it contributes to the tech talks that I do more than the actual tech, right? Because it all contributes to me being more comfortable on stage and being able to handle random things that come in from the audience, or, the machine will shut down and I need to improvise, or a question from the audience, or whatever it is. So I enjoy comedy for comedy's sake, but I also enjoy it just for the ability to build those chops for giving public talks. Thanks. I'm going to watch you. Okay. I don't know. You can go here. Sure.
Hi. My question's around the process of writing the book itself.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you had a lot of stories to pick and choose from.
Yep.
How did you go about picking the ones that you did? And also, did you take any creative liberties to make it into a narrative, all the different stories?
Also a good question. Sorry, can I get your name before I forget to ask?
Pratyush Moore.
Pratyush, okay, great. Right, so one of the trickiest things in writing this in particular, so I've done a few books, and a couple of them are programming books, and like the programming books took a year. Like it's a solid amount of work, right? This took 4 years just for the initial book, and then like another 6 months for the audiobook just for all the editing time that it took. But most of that time was like writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, because it was tricky to, I interviewed like 60 people, and then you have all the additional, research that you do for the book and other, books that you read to just provide background context and history and information. And all of this stuff is stuff that happened in parallel, like an inherently parallel project that is also very technically complex. And yet you need to tell a serial narrative just to make it comprehensible. And to me, that was very difficult. It was one of the tricks in writing this book in particular, and journalists probably know how to do this a lot better. I'm not a journalist. I needed to kind of figure it out on the fly. So the process for me was not just like picking and choosing the stories that would be interesting, but also how to tell the stories in a way that wasn't just confusing, because everything's happening at the same time, and how do you possibly follow that narrative? So the ones that I chose were generally chosen because this was the point that I was trying to make at that time. This was information, about Brian Swetlin, hiding some of the memory until until 1.0 was ready to launch and then freeing it up, right? That related directly to who Brian was and what he was doing on the systems team. But there were some other stories that were like really interesting, but they didn't really help the narrative. They would have confused it a little bit more. Or maybe in some cases it wasn't really my story to tell. Maybe it involved people that weren't there, that maybe this didn't put them in a good light or whatever. So you choose the stories for different reasons, but I would say the thing that drove most of them were, how can I tell the overall story of an Android in an engaging but also comprehensible way? Yep, thanks. Yeah. Hi.
So this is actually kind of coming back to the first question, but in a different light. So do you feel like the public speaking and your interest in comedy and doing, maybe I would assume if you're interested in comedy, you're probably a little bit more jovial and, perhaps something like that, maybe goofy, which is something I...
Wait, what?
So, I mean, I can relate to that at least because I like to do a bit of, I try my best to make presentations that are engaging to people, but I was wondering, did that kind of help you or encourage you to get into leadership, or did that help you in any way to be able to, commanding a big room, help you also command like, the bigger team and
right.
things like that?
Yeah, so is there a career advantage to doing this nonsense? Sorry, what was your name?
Abhijit Valluri.
Okay. Autocorrect says abject. So we're going to go with that. Sorry. Yeah, so is there a real reason to do this instead? I believe there is. It is not why I do it, but I do think that communication to groups of people, especially communication in the technical field for all of us, is an important part of our job. Like, you need to give a technical presentation to your team or to a larger team, or you need to talk to an executive or whatever. And the ability to understand a technical concept and then articulate it, I do think helps, not necessarily in leadership, but certainly in the communication aspects of what we do, even if it's, sending emails or whatever. It's not why I do it. I do it because I spent too many of my childhood years playing in piano recitals. And then you get used to this really weird thing of being on stage. And then there's like an adrenaline on stage that sort of feeds on itself. But I do think that it's beneficial in general. Like, I think it wouldn't be bad for people to do a bit of this, even if you have no intention of giving a tech talk at a conference. Just the ability to do that, or the ability to get over the nervousness that is inherent in the job of getting up in front of a group of people and making up the words that are coming out of your mouth in ways that may not string together and make sense all the time, and maybe that's all okay anyway. Where are we with the mic? Oh, sorry, we'll get there. Yes.
Is that all right? Yeah. So just a quick one, Chet. I would love to know more about your comedy writing process, like when you're doing your Type 5 stand-up, or when you're doing creating the jokes for the parody talks.
Yeah. Like,
what does that process look like of you sort of generating the funnies?
Oh, wow, good question. I wish I could rewind 3 years, because I don't know about the rest of you in the room, certainly anybody that likes to think about comedy, my comedy brain shut down during the pandemic. Like, it was really hard to think about being funny when everything was so kind of scary and you were just on your own in your office for 3 years, getting really sick of yourself. So my process over the last 3 years, I wouldn't put anything on that. But I think there's a couple of different things. There's many different flavors of comedy. So I had done a little bit of stand-up, and honestly, most of that job is just getting up in front of people, getting comfortable on stage, and then working through material, see what works in a live audience, as opposed to, I have this joke, this is going to be really funny, and then you deliver it, and you're like, nobody laughed, just like crickets in the room, because why? Well, we're engineers, we can sort of analyze why, and you go back and you try to refactor that, and that's what I kind of don't have enough time and energy to do that, to make stand-up really successful. But that's different than writing, where I think you have a bit more time to spend on landing a joke. Like, I could write an amusing essay that is exactly as funny as I wanted it to be, but it wouldn't have worked as a stand-up routine, right? Because you just have a little bit more attention span, I think, from people to absorb content in written form than you do. If you're telling stand-up, you need to land not just an amusing anecdote, but a joke, right? It needs to pop at the end and be surprising. Otherwise, there is no laugh point. There's no place for them to go, oh, I get it, and that's where the laughter comes. Whereas an essay is just amusing, right? you read it and go, oh, that's really clever. I never thought of that, particular take on things. I was going somewhere else with that too, and I forgot. I think it's really important to remember things. I wish I could. No, I think I'll stop there. Thanks. Yeah, let's do that, and then let's move back in the room a bit, because I'm feeling guilty that everybody is getting to ask a question because of where they sat.
Okay, so my name is Piotr. It's Piotr.
I was actually going to spell it that way, and let's see if it's going to get auto-corrected. No.
Okay,
Awesome.
So I remember your talk on Android history from last year's droidcon.
Yep.
And I remember you concentrating mostly on the good decisions that brought the platform to where it was and how quickly it grew and how it ended up to be the most popular operating system. I want to ask about the other decisions, some decisions that you now think were wrong or that slowed down the platform development. Do you mention them in your book? Like, is there some single moment that you remember, oh, we could have done it differently?
We certainly could have done it differently. I'm sure that we could have done things a lot better. So I think the most general one is like APIs in general, but I would apply this not just to early Android, but to any API you ever develop. The way that you decide to craft that now determines what it's going to look like. And 5 years from now, you're going to realize how people actually wanted to use it, and you will regret what you did. I haven't written an API that I haven't eventually regretted something about because I made it too limited, it's not flexible enough, or it doesn't integrate with these other things well enough, or I didn't account for this other use case. I just did the best that I could, and then you're kind of stuck with it because that's the way APIs work. You cannot change that after the fact. So that is certainly the case with some of the early Android APIs. There were a lot of APIs that were created around the very necessary constraint that the devices had very little memory, they had very teeny tiny little CPUs, and we had a very slow runtime and slow garbage collector. And so everything you did centered around, every API you created centered around, let's not allocate memory ever, right? So there's a lot of very crufty, weird, clunky APIs where we use mutability. You're going to pass us an object, and we are going to change it and pass it back because that is better than us allocating an object and passing it to you. It's not an elegant API, and maybe we would do something different now, but it was the best decision at the time. So sure, I regret what it looks like. On the other hand, the fact that they made those decisions and made the platform and the inner loop of your code as optimal as possible is one of the reasons why it worked so well at the beginning and continues to work now. So there are some regrets. There's some things that maybe I would do differently or the team would do differently. But I don't look at any and go, oh, that was bad. I think activity lifecycle is complicated. I don't think anybody would argue that point. Well, Diane might, but that's because Diane's the smartest person that I know. But it is a complicated situation to solve, right? Yes, it's complicated, and maybe there were ways that we could have simplified how to access that. But it also allowed things to happen in a way, in the launching of intents and like this, we're going to have, these little micro apps that launch each other, and we need to know when things are paused, and the task manager needs to be able to kill everything. Like, it was solving for a really complicated problem. It's a complicated API surface, but it's kind of a complicated problem. So I don't want to rethink that and say, well, I would do it totally differently. Like, well, I might, and I might do a much worse job of it. So no, I don't look at anything and say, I wish we hadn't done that. Because I think everything that they did was good enough in a really complicated space, and they did it fast enough that it worked. If they had taken more time and gone into the bike shed and debated these things over and over again and came out with a beautiful API, then they probably wouldn't be here, right? Somebody else would have come in with the platform that was needed before Android was ready. So running really fast and doing these things in sometimes a crafty way enabled it to work. Yep. Thanks. Yeah, go maybe over here. Thanks.
Hi, Chet. Richard,
Hi.
my name. Question regarding Android history, but more recent history. So we had suite names for all the Android versions, kind of. Then it was scrapped away, and now we have Tiramisu, which is Android T, right? Can you give us an unofficial like what happened behind the scenes that the name is brought back for sweets?
Like why? Sorry, the question was why are they named after desserts?
No, like why is it coming back that there is a dessert name now with tiramisu? If there is an unofficial or maybe the official version.
You mean because they went away for a couple of releases?
Yes.
So they never went away, but they were more internal. Like we always have a code name for each release, and if you look in the code, like we do reference it. Like what was RVC Red Velvet Cake, I think, for the R release, and I don't think we talked about it externally. What we did was someone decided, and I'd like to point out that someone was not me, that our naming and versioning is confusing to real people. Like we have API version, we have the release number, we have the release name, and I think there's another thing in there as well. And other platforms, like you just got the release, this is release number 57. And maybe it's confusing to people because reasons I don't understand. Like I don't think 3 or 4 things is too much to remember. I mean, it is for me, but that's because I don't remember anything. But that was really the reason we were trying to simplify how we referred to these things on the outside, because then it got confusing for people. Like there's nothing about key lime pie that tells you what's in that release. And then you get confused. Wait, was that in the K release? Wait, what was it? Was it the lollipop release? Like there wasn't really a good reason for it other than historical, and it's kind of fun. And then they just decided, well, maybe it would be less confusing if we just had the release numbers. But there were always the release names internally. If we're making those more public again, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know we had made tiramisu public. I live on the inside. I don't know what's going on the outside. I think it's great because I think that's an element of Android history and culture that I think is kind of important, that we don't take ourselves that seriously and we're not really that polished. But I don't know. As far as I know, we still refer to release numbers, but it's all about user confusion, I think. Thanks. What was the name again? Was it Richard? Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, right there.
We're 2 minutes over.
I'm 2 minutes over already? One more question. I'm sorry. And then we're going to go over there. And I don't know, like I only answered like 5 questions. How are we going to do this? Yeah.
Okay, I'm Philip.
Hi, Philip.
And yeah, I'm going to ask a question about futures because it's the last one. So what do you think?
Did you say future or fuchsia?
Future.
It's big, okay.
So what do you think is going to be the next thing from Google or Android that's going to blow our mind?
On fuchsia?
No, in the future.
It is future. Okay, I kept mishearing this. Good. That's a better question than talking about fuchsia in the Android session, because I don't have an answer for that. I can always go on about the future. So what do you, like future of what? What? What's the secret thing that I can't talk about in public? So that's all the time that we have today. I honestly don't. I don't know. I mean, otherwise, maybe I wouldn't be writing graphics code. No, I would. I like writing graphics code. I don't know. I never see these things coming. Like, I don't see the technology waves. I think that's one of the reasons that they work, is they sort of come out of left field and take everybody by surprise. It's why things like Android and Apple succeeded in a place that was, in the platform space, that was honestly dominated by the mobile players at the time, Nokia and RIM, or why isn't Microsoft in this space, right? It's because they are inherently surprises to everybody that's already there. So I'm already here right now. I'm not seeing that thing coming, and it'll surprise me, and I won't succeed in it. That's my takeaway. Is like, for every platform, like there's all the successful players, and then there's the next thing that completely wipes the others out because they just didn't see it coming. I don't know right now if we're entering into another phase where there's that new thing that's going to come out, or if it's going to be sort of incremental changes that build onto existing ecosystems. Stuff like, well, you got the watch to talk to your phone, you got the TV over there, you got the, connected car and the home stuff. Like, is it just more and more of that that's sort of incrementally improving the current ecosystem, or is there something I'm not seeing, the robotic dog that we're all going to need tomorrow? Given what's going on with my dog recently, I wouldn't mind that, actually. So there's an idea. Robotic dogs. All right, you can quote me on that. That's it for the questions. I'm going to be over there with books. And what I meant was there. It's a localization problem. Oh, okay, so there's a desk around the corner, and if you're interested in a book, I'll see you there. Thank you.